The first thing you need to understand about the Vex'ri is that they're obsessed with patterns. Every species they've conquered followed predictable movement sequences. Hunt, gather, reproduce, expand. Simple, linear, boring. The second thing you need to understand is that humans don't follow patterns. We break them. We shatter them. We take those beautiful mathematical certainties and turn them into confetti. Commander Jake Morrison stared at the holographic display floating above his wristcom, watching dozens of red dots crawl across the surface of New Geneva like digital ants. Each dot represented a Vex'ri scout ship, methodically scanning the abandoned colonial settlement for signs of human activity. "Still nothing on thermal," whispered Sergeant Maya Chen from her position behind a collapsed storage unit. Her voice carried that particular mix of amusement and anticipation that made Jake's tactical heart sing. They've been circling for 3 hours now. Jake allowed himself a small smile. 3 hours. The Vex'ri had conquered 17 civilizations in the past century, each campaign lasting no more than 6 standard months. They prided themselves on efficiency. Quick strikes, overwhelming force, total domination. But here they were, stuck in analysis paralysis over a supposedly empty human colony. "Patience, Maya. Let them think we've run away with our tails between our legs." Jake's fingers drummed silently against his rifle stock. Radio silence continues. Nobody moves until I give the word. The settlement of New Geneva had been humanity's crown jewel in the Kepler system. 50,000 colonists, advanced agriculture, mining operations that could fund a small war. When the Vex'ri invasion fleet arrived 2 weeks ago, long-range sensors had detected their approach. The evacuation order came down from Colonial Command within hours. Or so the Vex'ri thought. In reality, 49,000 colonists had indeed evacuated, but 1,000 of humanity's finest soldiers had stayed behind, along with enough supplies to last 6 months. They'd hidden in maintenance tunnels, underground storage facilities, and abandoned buildings. They'd powered down everything electronic, masked their heat signatures, and waited. The Vex'ri had expected resistance. They prepared for orbital bombardment, ground assault, urban warfare. What they hadn't prepared for was nothing. No signals, no movement, no signs of life whatsoever. Contact on Grid 77 came the whispered voice of Corporal David Park through Jake's earpiece. Single scout ship, hovering about 50 meters above the old marketplace. Pilots getting brave. Jake switched his display to David's position. The young Korean-American soldier had positioned himself in the bell tower of the colony's community center, giving him perfect overwatch of the central plaza. Through David's scope cam, Jake could see the sleek, silver Vex'ri scout ship descending slowly toward the empty marketplace. The Vex'ri were bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, but with elongated limbs and heads that reminded Jake of praying mantises. Their technology was impressive, but predictable. Energy weapons, advanced scanners, ships that could travel faster than light. Standard galactic civilization package. What they lacked was imagination. "He's landing," David reported. "Pilots disembarking. 2 escorts with him." Jake felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The moment they'd been waiting for. But not yet. Not quite yet. All units, maintain position. Let them get comfortable. The Vex'ri commander, if that's what he was, stood roughly 7 feet tall with the characteristic gray-green skin of his species. His movements were methodical, precise. He gestured to his escorts, and they began spreading out across the plaza, scanning buildings with handheld devices. Thermal reads are negative. One of the escorts reported in the clicking, chittering language of the Vex'ri. Jake's translation software converted the words into text on his display. No biological signatures detected. "Impossible," the commander replied. "Intelligence confirms human presence on this world as recently as 14 rotations ago. They cannot have simply vanished." Jake grinned. "Oh, but they could. They absolutely could." The commander approached the fountain in the center of the plaza. It was a beautiful piece of art, carved from local stone and depicting the first colonists arriving on New Geneva. Water had once flowed from the top tier down to the bottom, but the pumps had been shut off during the supposed evacuation. Scan the water reclamation systems, The commander ordered, "Check for recent usage patterns." One of the escorts moved toward the fountain's base, pulling out a more sophisticated scanning device. Jake watched the alien's movements with professional interest, thorough, methodical, completely focused on the task at hand, which is exactly what Jake had been counting on. "Maya, you're green for Sector 4. Take your team and circle around behind the medical center. Stay low, stay quiet." "Copy that, Commander. Moving now." Jake could see Maya's team of 12 soldiers beginning their slow, careful advance through the ruins of the residential district. They moved like ghosts, using every piece of cover, every shadow, every blind spot in the Vex'ri scanning pattern. The alien at the fountain was getting readings now. Jake could see the confusion in the creature's body language as the scanner detected trace amounts of human biological material in the water system. Old traces, fading traces, exactly what you'd expect from a recently abandoned colony. "Commander," the escort called out, "I'm detecting human genetic markers in the water supply. Degraded samples, consistent with departure approximately 10 to 12 rotations ago." The Vex'ri commander's head swiveled toward a subordinate. "Departure? Not elimination. Negative. No indicators of violence or rapid population decline. This appears to be an organized evacuation." Jake felt a surge of satisfaction. The Vex'ri were intelligent, but their intelligence was algorithmic. They processed information, analyzed patterns, drew logical conclusions. They couldn't conceive of a species that would voluntarily abandon a thriving colony just to set a trap. "Torres, status report from the industrial sector?" "All quiet, Commander. No movement detected, but I've got eyes on 2 more scout ships approaching from the north." Jake switched his display to show Elena Torres' position. The former Marine sniper had set up shop in the defunct fusion plant's cooling tower, giving her a commanding view of the northern approach. Her rifle was a work of art, a custom-built weapon that could punch through Vex'ri armor at 2 kilometers. "Let them come," Jake murmured. "The more the merrier." The Vex'ri commander was growing frustrated. Jake could see it in the way the alien's elongated fingers tapped against his weapon stock, in the sharp movement of his head as he scanned the empty plaza. This wasn't going according to plan. "Expand the search perimeter," the commander ordered. "I want every building, every tunnel, every hiding place examined. The humans are here somewhere." "Actually," Jake said quietly into his comm, "we're everywhere." The moment had come. Jake could feel it in his bones, that perfect tactical instinct that had kept him alive through 3 colonial wars and countless skirmishes. The Vex'ri were committed now. They'd landed multiple ships, deployed ground troops, and focused their attention on the colony itself. They'd stopped looking up. "All units, this is actual. Execute Phase 1. Repeat, execute Phase 1. The first sign the Vex'ri had of trouble was when their scout ship exploded. Elena Torres' rifle shot came from nearly a kilometer away, a hypervelocity round that punched through the ship's hull and detonated the primary power core. The explosion lit up the plaza like a miniature sun, sending the 3 Vex'ri soldiers diving for cover behind the fountain. Before the echoes of the first explosion had faded, Maya's team opened fire from the medical center, 12 human soldiers with military-grade plasma rifles, shooting from concealed positions at aliens who were pinned down in the open. The Vex'ri commander's translator picked up his panic communications. "Base station, this is landing party 7. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Human forces are present and engaging." "Impossible," came the reply from orbit. "Our sensors show no human presence on the surface." Jake stepped out from behind his cover, assault rifle raised. "Surprise," he said, though he knew the Vex'ri couldn't understand him without a translator. The remaining 2 aliens saw him and raised their weapons, but Jake was already moving. He rolled behind a piece of rubble as energy bolts sizzled past his position, then popped up to return fire. His shots were precise, disciplined. One alien went down immediately, its chest armor cracked and smoking. The commander was made of sterner stuff. He grabbed his fallen subordinate's weapon and began laying down suppressing fire while backing toward the nearest building. Smart, disciplined, exactly what Jake would have done. which is why Jake had positioned 3 soldiers in that exact building. The Vex'ri commander made it 5 meters before Corporals Johnson, Kim, and Okafor opened fire from the windows above. The aliens' personal shields flared once, twice, then collapsed under the concentrated assault. "Target down," Johnson reported. "Plaza is secure." But Jake was already thinking ahead. The real battle was just beginning. "Torres, report on those incoming ships." 2 scout ships, closing fast. "They're not landing. Looks like they're setting up for a strafing run." Jake grimaced. The Vex'ri weren't stupid. They'd realized their ground team was gone, and now they were switching to orbital bombardment protocols. Time to show them why that was a mistake. "All units, Phase 2 is a go." "Repeat, Phase 2 is a go." Across the colony, human soldiers emerged from their hiding places. They moved with purpose, running toward predetermined positions while the Vex'ri ships circled overhead. To the aliens, it must have looked like panic. Humans scattering in all directions, abandoning their concealment in a desperate attempt to escape. That's exactly what Jake wanted them to think. "Come on," he whispered, watching the 2 scout ships through his rifle scope. "Take the bait." The lead ship dropped to attack altitude, its weapon systems charging. Jake could see the blue glow of energy collectors as the ship prepared to strafe the fleeing humans below. "Now," Jake said. The surface-to-air missile launcher had been hidden beneath a collapsed section of the colony's main administration building. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos had been lying next to it for 3 hours, waiting for exactly this moment. The missile streaked skyward, its guidance system locked onto the lead scout ship's thermal signature. The Vex'ri pilot had perhaps 2 seconds to realize his mistake before the warhead detonated against his ship's hull. The second ship tried to climb, but Elena Torres was ready. Her second shot of the day punched through the ship's engine housing, sending it spinning out of control into the residential district. "Air threats neutralized," Torres reported, "but we've got company coming." Jake looked up at the sky, where more lights were beginning to descend through the atmosphere. The Vex'ri were committing more forces. Good. That meant the plan was working. "All units, fall back to secondary positions. Time to show these bugs what happens when you hunt humans on human ground." The real battle was about to begin. #aliens tried to track human movement, but we weren't moving, we were waiting. Admiral Kethvar of the Vex'ri 4th Fleet stared at the tactical display with growing unease. 3 scout ships destroyed, 2 full squads of ground forces eliminated, and still, their sensors showed minimal human presence on the surface of New Geneva. "This is impossible," he clicked to his tactical officer. "Humans do not possess stealth technology capable of masking an entire military force." Lieutenant Commander Zephyray's mandibles twitched nervously. "Admiral, perhaps we underestimated their evacuation capabilities. The attack could be automated defense systems." Kethvar's compound eyes focused on the younger officer. "Automated systems do not adapt. They do not learn. They do not set traps." He gestured at the display. "This is something else entirely." Down on the surface, Commander Jake Morrison was having the time of his life. The Vex'ri had just deployed 2 full companies of ground troops, roughly 300 soldiers, all following their standard urban warfare protocols. Methodical, predictable, doomed. "David, how's our audience looking?" Jake asked, crouched behind the remains of a delivery truck in the colony's merchant district. "Beautiful, Commander. They're spreading out in a classic sweep pattern, squad by squad. No imagination whatsoever." David's voice carried a note of professional disdain. "They're treating this like a textbook urban pacification mission." Jake grinned. "Then let's teach them why textbooks get people killed." The Vex'ri advance was impressive to watch. 300 soldiers moving in perfect coordination, covering each other's movements, maintaining communication discipline, scanning every possible hiding spot. If they'd been facing a conventional enemy, it would have been devastatingly effective. But humans weren't conventional. "Maya, your team ready in the subway tunnels?" "Locked and loaded, Commander. We got charges set on support pillars for 3 city blocks. 1 word from you, and half the merchant district comes down." "Outstanding. Torres, still got Overwatch?" Affirmative. Move to the water treatment facility. I can see their entire northern flank from here. Jake nodded. The Vex'ri were thorough, but they thought in 2 dimensions. They'd searched every building, every alley, every possible hiding spot at ground level. They'd even sent teams to check the rooftops. But they'd missed the underground infrastructure that connected every major building in the colony. Humans had learned to think in 3 dimensions centuries ago. Underground, overground, everything in between. Contact front, whispered Corporal Park. Leading squad is approaching the pharmacy. 3 hostiles, moving carefully. Jake switched his display to show Park's position. The young soldier had relocated to the colony's old bank building, setting up a perfect ambush point overlooking the main street. Through a scope, Jake could see 3 Vex'ri soldiers advancing toward the ruined pharmacy where they'd staged medical supplies. Take them, Jake ordered. Parks rifle coughed once, twice, 3 times. The hypervelocity rounds punched through Vex'ri armor like paper, dropping all 3 soldiers before they could even raise their weapons. Targets down, but I've got movement on the flanks. They're adapting. Of course they were. The Vex'ri weren't stupid, just inflexible. They'd learned that humans were present and dangerous, so they'd modify their tactics accordingly. More caution, wider spacing, better coordination, all of which played perfectly into Jake's hands. All units, Phase 3 is go. Time to show them what guerrilla warfare really means. The next 15 minutes turned into a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Human soldiers appeared from impossible angles, fired a few shots, then vanished back into the colony's hidden infrastructure. The Vex'ri found themselves fighting ghosts, shooting at shadows, chasing enemies who were always 1 step ahead. Maya's team struck first, emerging from a storm drain directly beneath a Vex'ri patrol. For soldiers with plasma rifles, firing point-blank at surprised aliens who'd been scanning the rooftops for threats. The engagement lasted less than 10 seconds before the humans melted back into the underground tunnels. Torres followed up with a long-range shot that took out a Vex'ri heavy weapon specialist just as he was setting up a support position. The alien's power armor exploded in a shower of sparks and shrapnel, sending his squad mates diving for cover. "This is Squad Leader Vorthake," came the panic transmission Jake's intercepted communications were picking up. "We are taking heavy casualties. Enemy forces are using subterranean approaches. Request immediate orbital support." Negative. Admiral Kefvar replied from orbit. "Too much risk of civilian infrastructure damage. Continue ground operations." Jake laughed out loud. Civilian infrastructure. The Vex'ri were trying to conquer the colony intact, which meant they couldn't just glass it from orbit. They needed to take it building by building, street by street, which meant they had to play by human rules. "Johnson, Kim, Okafor, you're up. Show them what happens when they group up." The 3 corporals had been waiting in the colony's old shopping center, positioned with clear lines of sight to the main avenue. When a full Vex'ri squad bunched up behind a damaged hover car, all 3 soldiers opened fire simultaneously. The concentrated assault overwhelmed the aliens' personal shields in seconds. 6 more Vex'ri soldiers went down, their weapons scattered across the pavement. "We're getting a reaction," Torres reported. "They're pulling back, trying to regroup." Jake nodded. This was the critical moment. The Vex'ri had taken heavy casualties and were starting to panic. They'd either retreat completely or commit to a full assault. Either way, Jake was ready. "All units, prepare for Phase 4. They're about to get desperate." Admiral Kefvar was indeed getting desperate. His ground forces had lost nearly 30% of their strength, and they still had no clear picture of enemy numbers or positions. The humans were fighting like nothing in his tactical database, appearing and disappearing like vengeful spirits. "Deploy the hunter-killer teams," he ordered. "Small units, maximum mobility. If the humans want to play hide and seek, we'll give them a proper hunt." The Vex'ri hunter-killer teams were elite units, specially trained for exactly this kind of warfare. They operated in groups of 3, using advanced scanners and stealth technology to track down insurgents and resistance fighters. They'd broken the back of a dozen rebellions across the galaxy, but they'd never faced humans before. "Contact," Elena Torres whispered into her comm. 3 bogies, moving along the southern perimeter. They're using some kind of active camouflage. Jake switched to Torres' feed and frowned. The Vex'ri soldiers were barely visible, their outlines shimmering like heat mirages. Advanced technology, but not perfect. Human eyes could still track them if they knew what to look for. Can you take them? Negative. Too much risk of missing in this light. But I've got an idea. Jake waited. Torres was one of the best snipers he'd ever worked with, and her ideas were usually worth hearing. There's a chemical storage tank about 50 meters from their position. Industrial solvent, highly flammable. One shot, and boom! Collateral damage? Minimal. The blast would be contained by the surrounding buildings. Jake considered for a moment. The Vex'ri were trying to hunt his people, using their superior technology to level the playing field. Time to remind them why humans had fought their way to the top of the food chain on every world they'd ever settled. Take the shot. Torres' rifle spoke once. The chemical tank erupted in a brilliant orange fireball that lit up the entire southern district. The 3 Vex'ri soldiers were caught in the blast, their stealth systems overloading as they were thrown against the nearest wall. Targets eliminated. But I'm seeing more movement. They're committing everything. Jake looked at his tactical display and felt a cold smile spread across his face. Admiral Ketvar had just made the mistake Jake had been hoping for. Instead of retreating and regrouping, the Vex'ri commander was doubling down. Every soldier on the planet was now committed to the ground assault, which meant they were all trapped in Jake's killing field. All units, this is actual. Execute Phase 5. Repeat, execute Phase 5. The final phase of the plan was brutally simple. For the past 4 hours, Maya's engineering team had been quietly planting charges throughout the colony's infrastructure, not to destroy buildings, but to create choke points, collapsed roads that funneled enemy movements, blocked tunnels that eliminated escape routes, debris fields that provided perfect cover for human defenders. Charges are set, Maya reported. Ready to bring down the whole northern district on command. Do it. The explosions came in sequence, each one carefully timed to create maximum chaos. Buildings didn't collapse, but their facades crumbled. Roads didn't disappear, but became impassable to vehicles. The Vex'ri found themselves trapped in a maze of rubble and debris, separated from their support units, and unable to coordinate their movements. Now we hunt them, Jake said. The final battle lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of close-quarters combat in the ruins of New Geneva, human soldiers using every trick they'd learned in 3 centuries of warfare. They fought from the shadows, used the terrain to their advantage, and showed no mercy to an enemy that had come to conquer their world. The Vex'ri fought bravely, but they were out of their element. Their superior technology meant nothing in the confined spaces of the ruined colony. Their numerical advantage evaporated as human soldiers picked them off one by one. When the shooting finally stopped, Jake stood in the center of the plaza where it had all begun. Around him, the wreckage of the Vex'ri invasion force littered the ground. 53 human soldiers had held off and defeated 300 alien invaders. Commander, David's voice came through the comm. We're getting transmissions from the orbital fleet. They're requesting permission to withdraw. Jake looked up at the sky, where the lights of the Vex'ri ships were clearly visible. Patch me through to their admiral. A moment later, Admiral Ketvar's voice crackled through the translation system. Human Commander, I am Admiral Ketvar of the Vex'ri 4th Fleet. I wish to discuss terms of withdrawal. This is Commander Morrison. Jake replied. Terms are simple. You leave. You never come back. You tell every other species in the galaxy that humans are off-limits. Your terms are acceptable, Ketvar replied after a long pause. But I must ask, how many soldiers did you have on the surface? Our intelligence suggested a full evacuation. Jake smiled. Admiral, you spent all this time trying to track our movements. But we weren't moving. We were waiting. 53 soldiers, Admiral. 53 humans were all it took to destroy your entire invasion force. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could almost hear the alien admiral's worldview crumbling. 53, Ketvar finally whispered. Impossible. Nothing's impossible, Admiral. You just have to know how to wait. The Vex'ri fleet departed the system that night, carrying with them a new understanding of human warfare. They'd expected movement, expansion, predictable patterns. Instead, they'd found patience, cunning, in a species that turned their greatest strength into their enemy's greatest weakness. Jake Morrison watched the ships disappear into hyperspace, then turned to address his soldiers. 53 humans who just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Outstanding work, everyone. Mission accomplished. He paused, looking around at the faces of his team. Now, who wants to explain to Colonial Command why we decided to start an interstellar war? The laughter that followed echoed across the ruins of New Geneva, carried with the sound of the species that had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Humans had arrived, and they were done hiding.